We will honor you always, Father. You are welcome in this place. You are welcome in this place.
Do you know that you can't find calendars this year?
I got some.
I have
I have
some.
too.
Interesting.
Every year I keep a calendar in for work, and it's like I use like a day planner calendar. So usually through the month of December, when I'm out and about, usually I pick them up cheap someplace, Dollar General or Walgreens or someplace like this year. All through the month of December, every time I'd stop someplace, they didn't have them. The only ones I could find were the ones that were dated. And I don't know if they were all sitting on a boat out in the Pacific Ocean someplace, or if it was just one more thing about 2021 that was like stuck someplace. And but every time I'd stop to get one, the thought would occur to me. It's like somebody's trying to keep me in 2021. And I always every year at the beginning, I like new beginnings.
Yes.
I look for every opportunity to start over. I love the Sabbath. I love the fact that God set up a system, a way for us to end the week and start a new one. There's so much about the Sabbath that we've lost. We've like just let it go. It's just like, but the Sabbath really was God's way of giving us every 7 days we get to start over.
Yes.
We get to. It's like you get to put everything behind you and start fresh. And so I've always liked New Year's since I've been an adult. I like the idea of a brand new year, starting over, of leaving one year and looking forward and starting into a new year. And so usually every year in all through the month of December is about when it starts for me. I start to think about that. I start to sort of process it, and I think about, okay, what all happened in this last year, and sort of what all the lessons I need to learn, because I want to let go of that and move on.
Yeah.
But then I also start thinking about what's coming in the new year, and I start asking God to show me what to expect, what to look forward to. What is my big question is, what is God going to do? What is God up to?
Yes.
What is God getting ready to do? And everything that you read and hear on the news is pretty much irrelevant,
Right.
because the only thing that's important is what God is going to do, what God is doing.
Yes.
And the only thing that's the only thing that makes can turn a regular moment into an eternal moment. And so this year was no different, except that all month long I sort of in a fog about it. Like I just haven't been able to hear very clearly what's coming in 2022. And that's not totally abnormal for me, but still I've been a little bit disappointed by it, because I really want to know what God is up to. And so this week I've been seeking God about it and asking God about it, and all I got this week was that I feel like 2021 was it's almost like it was a year that didn't happen.
I know.
It feels like it feels, and what I mean by that, because I know there were a lot of significant things that took place. There was, especially personally for a lot of us, there were some very huge
Come on.
things that took place in 2021.
Yes.
And those events, I'm not denigrating those events or trying to make them small or make them, I'm not saying they weren't important, but what I've noticed and what I feel like is that it almost feels like we just didn't move. We just didn't make any progress towards anything. It doesn't feel to me like we've lost a lot of ground, but it doesn't feel like we've gained a lot of ground. It feels like, to me, in a lot of ways, it feels like it's almost like it was a year of starts and stops. Like you'd feel like something was about to happen, whether it was collectively in the world or even personally for a lot of people that I know. It seemed like there was this, something took place and you thought maybe this is the beginning of something. Maybe this is we're getting ready to move into, and then it just would slowly come to a halt, or it just didn't go anywhere. It just didn't progress into anything, like, and you find yourself back where you started from. And it just almost feels like that was sort of for me, and maybe not for you, and if not, that's okay. You don't have to join me in this, but it just seems like here we are starting a new year, and I feel like we're at the same place we were last year. Some of the same people I know that were sick last year are sick again this year.
Yeah.
With COVID, of all things.
Yeah.
Wow.
I feel like last year at the beginning of the year, there was all this upheaval. If you remember, the beginning of 2021 was right after the election, and all of this controversy and all of this stuff was up in the air, and what's going to happen, and who's going to end up being the president, and how many presidents are we going to have, and all of those questions were being asked, if you remember, right now at this time of the year last year. Well, it seems like none of those questions were really answered very well. It just seems like we've just kind of gone through a whole year of starting and stop and starting and stop and starting and stop, and nothing's really happened. And so I've been thinking about that, and I was reading about Joseph this morning. And in Genesis chapter 40, Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers. He had gone down to Egypt. He had landed sort of on his feet in Potiphar's house. And he had actually risen to a fairly high position as far as how high you could raise as a slave. He had risen to a position in Potiphar's household as he was sort of in charge of all of Potiphar's stuff. And Joseph was a good man. There's very few men in the Bible that there's nothing about them, about their flaws or mistakes that's recorded. Joseph is one of those men. Almost all the other great men of the Bible, Moses, Noah, David, Samson, Gideon, Solomon, all of them, when you read their stories, their flaws are included in the stories. They all made huge mistakes, big mistakes. And they're recorded in the Bible. Yeah. Joseph is one of the few men in the Bible that there's nothing. I'm not saying he was perfect. It's just none of his mistakes or flaws were recorded. So he was a good man. And in spite of the fact that he was a good man, he went through a lot of hard stuff. And so in Genesis chapter 40, Joseph, after being sold into slavery by his brothers, which is a mind-boggling thing to begin with, he lands on his feet sort of in Potiphar's house. He rises up, and of course he gets accused of sexually molesting Potiphar's wife. He ends up back in prison, and in Genesis chapter 40, that's where we find Joseph. And while he's there, probably wondering, what am I doing here? Why am I here? How did this happen to me? What did I do to deserve this? How did these circumstances come into my life? How did I end up here? And so while he's in prison, in a very, very dark place, something happens. Two men come to prison who both of them worked for the king, for Pharaoh. One was the cupbearer, one was the baker. And these two men have dreams, and Joseph, because he has the gift from God, the ability to interpret dreams, interprets these two dreams for these two men. And so we know the story. The one man, he tells the cupbearer, he says, you're going to, after 3 days, you're going to be restored to your position. You're going to be taken out of this prison. You're going to be given your old position back, which was a position of honor and prestige. And he said, your life is going to keep going. You're going to be fine. The other man, of course, his dream was the exact opposite. He said, in 3 days, you're going to have your head cut off. And that's exactly what happened. So these two men come into Joseph's, into his life, into his circumstances, and the man that Joseph explains to, you're going to be going back to Potiphar, you're going back to your position. He says this in verse 14 of chapter 40. He says, but when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. Now, I think Joseph had to look at this event, this situation, as the potential to bring light into a very dark place. I'm sure he thought, this is my chance. This is my opportunity. I don't know what prison was like in Egypt. I'm guessing it was worse than what we have and know about prisons today, which are bad enough. But I think it was probably even worse. And for Joseph, a slave who really was looked at more like he was something, a possession to be owned, for him to end up in prison, I'm sure he wasn't getting a lot of tender loving care. I'm sure it was a very dark place. I would imagine that there was some kind of a door or opening into the prison. I'm guessing that it had bars and some kind of a lock on it. It was probably guarded. And I'm sure that the men in prison, especially Joseph, must have every day looked at that door, that gate, and thought, what's going to come through that gate that's going to set me free? There was nothing Joseph could do to change his situation. His situation was not one of his own making. He wasn't there for a certain length of time to be corrected. He was put in prison basically to end his life. And Joseph had no way of getting out of prison. So when those two men came into his circle, into his circumstances, and when he told the cupbearer, you're going back to Pharaoh and your life is going to resume, you're going to see good times again, he must have thought, this is my chance. And so he sent word with the cupbearer. He said, when you get out, I want you to tell Pharaoh about me. Tell him that I don't deserve to be here. I don't belong here. I'm not here because of anything I did wrong. And I'm sure Joseph must have put all of his hope and dreams must have at that point centered on this cupbearer. But the strangest thing happened. Down in verse 23, it says the chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. he forgot him.
Mm-mm.
So all of Joseph's hopes and potential for getting out of prison, out of this dark place, out of the night, sort of just evaporated. And it wasn't like there was a slamming of the door. It wasn't like the cupbearer said, "No, I'm not gonna say anything about you. I'm not going to do that." The cupbearer probably promised Joseph. He was ecstatic when Joseph told him the meaning of his dream. He was happy when Joseph said, "Yeah, you're going back to your position of honor." And so when Joseph said, "Would you remind Pharaoh? Would you tell him about me?" I'm sure the cupbearer said, "Yeah, I'll be glad to. Anything for you. You're my new best friend." In fact, as soon as I get there, as soon as I see the Pharaoh, I'm going to tell him about you. I'm going to plead your case. I'm going to explain to him, you can count on me. I am going to get you out of this place. But then I don't know what happened. I don't know if the cupbearer, maybe it had something to do with the way he was restored. Maybe the first day back he thought, you know what? The king is still maybe not real, I'm not sure about my position. I'll just wait for tomorrow to tell the king what I promised Joseph I would do. I'll wait for a better opportunity. I'll wait till the king's in a better mood. I'll wait till I have my old position back and I'm on a little firmer footing, and then I'll do what I said. Maybe that first day back his intentions were still good. But then as day went by and the next day went by and the next day by, it was sort of like 2021 for Joseph. It was like it just slowly, this expectation. I'm sure after the cupbearer left, I'm sure Joseph must have thought in his mind, okay, it's going to take him a day or two for the cupbearer to get reestablished. I'm sure it's going to take Pharaoh a day or two to look into my situation. And I'm sure maybe it's going to take a week before they're going to get around to coming for me. But I'm sure after the first couple days, I'm guessing the first day after the cupbearer left, I imagine David got up and went and sat and looked at the door of the prison. Just waiting to see who was going to come through that door, who was going to bring him his deliverance, who was going to bring him out of this dark place. But every day, the prison door stayed shut. And on the days that it did open, it wasn't somebody for him. It was just another prisoner being sent into the jail. Or it was worse, maybe somebody else getting out. But Joseph's night just continued on and on and on and on. If you read the rest of the story in the next chapter, 41, it wasn't until 2 years later that something happened, and we know how the king Pharaoh had a dream, and finally the cupbearer, it triggered him, and he thought, oh man, he said, I just remembered a promise I forgot. And so finally he told Pharaoh about Joseph, and we know the story, how Joseph was then taken out of prison. But what God wants to talk to us about today is that 2 years of night season. Because a lot of us are in that night season right now. We're waiting for something to happen. We're waiting for someone to come through the door of the prison of our circumstances and set us free. A lot of our circumstances, we're not even sure how we got here. We're not even sure why this happened. And it really doesn't matter whether or not you're in the circumstances because you put yourself there or because it was somebody else and you're there not of your own accord. If you're in the circumstances you're in, that's where you're at. And for a lot of us, it feels like this night season has just gone on for so long. Joseph's night season literally lasted 10 or 12 years. He was a young man when he was sold into slavery. He was a young man at the age of 17 when he was footloose and fancy free, and he was walking along the road to check on his brothers. He was his father's favorite. He had the stamp of his father's approval on him. He was wearing the princely robe, and he was doing fine. His future looked bright. He had dreams. He had been given an assignment and a destiny by God, and everything looked good. And then all of a sudden, he walked into the camp where his brothers were staying, and the next thing you know, there's a black hood being thrown over his face. Their robe, his princely garment is being stripped off of him. He's thrown into the dark hole. He's down there for a few hours, and the next thing you know, he's being led off with a collar around his neck into slavery, into a foreign land, into a strange place, never to see his family again. This night season for Joseph went on and on and on. And those last 2 years for Joseph had to be the hardest. It had to feel like it was never going to end. But here's what I want to say to you today, and here's what Holy Spirit wants to say to us today. There is always, always a sunrise. At the end of every night, there's a sunrise. God has not forgotten us. God has not forgotten you. God has not forgotten the promises that he made you. And I don't care how dark your night season is. I don't care how long it seems like it has been that you have been in these circumstances, in these situations. God's promises are always kept.
Yes.
The question is, what do we do in the night season? What do we do in the waiting period? Because it's the waiting that's the hardest part. It had to be a nightmare for Joseph every day to wake up and think, maybe today someone's coming to let me out of here. Every day, maybe this is the day that my situation's going to change. What do you do in the waiting season? The first thing is this: don't give up. Don't give up. Just because the situation looks helpless, just because the situation looks hopeless, God is at work. When God started speaking this word to me at the beginning of the week, I thought of all of the things that happened all through the Bible in the night season. I thought about the nation of Israel being stuck between the Red Sea and the Egyptian army. It was during the night that the winds blew. It was during the night that the Israelites walked through the Red Sea. And it was during the night that God brought their deliverance. I thought about Daniel in the lion's den all through the night, wondering what's going to happen to him. I thought about all of the things that took place in the night season. Because even though the night season seems so long, and it always feels like nothing is happening. It always seems like there's nothing going on. And it always feels like I'm just sitting here waiting and there's nothing changing. Remember this: God is always at work. God is always moving. There was things that were taking place in the night season when Joseph was in prison. God was lining things up. See, the problem Joseph had is Joseph wanted his circumstances to be over. Joseph just wanted out of jail. He would have been happy just to get out of prison. He told the cupbearer, he said, tell Pharaoh I don't belong here. See if you can get me out of here. What Joseph didn't understand in the night season was that God had something bigger in store. God was interested in more than just getting Joseph out of his circumstances. We get so caught up in our circumstances. We get so caught up in what's going on in our world. And so we start praying, God, do something about our circumstances. If you just get me out of these circumstances, just change these circumstances, I'll be a happy camper. What you need to understand is that God has a much bigger plan for your life. God uses the night season to, it's more than just teach us things. There's an absorption that takes place. There's things that happen to you that God is literally changing you, getting you ready to fulfill your destiny. Joseph's destiny was much greater than what he could understand at this point. I don't know if Joseph remembered the dreams he had about his brothers bowing down to him when he was in prison. I'm guessing he forgot about it. I'm guessing he was probably more like you and I. He got so caught up in all the stuff that had happened to him that he didn't have control over, and all the bad things, that he had forgotten what God had promised him. Folks, listen to me. God has something big planned for each one of us.
Yes.
He's got something huge planned for each one of us. Joseph's life was more than about him getting out of prison.
Yes. Yes.
We know the story. When Joseph got out of prison, he went before the Pharaoh, and within a few days, Joseph went from being in prison to being second in charge of the entire kingdom of Egypt. Joseph was the guy that God had picked to deliver the world from famine. All of this happened, all of this took place while Joseph was in the prison, when he was living in the night. Realize this, if you're in a night season in your life and you don't understand what's going on, and all you can see is prison walls, and all you can see is circumstances that you don't think are fair, and you don't understand why you're in these circumstances, and you're waiting for those circumstances to change, understand something. God has something bigger than your circumstances.
Yes.
He's got something bigger than just getting you out of jail. He's preparing you for something big.
Yes.
And the only place you can get this preparation is in this night season. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't let the enemy destroy you. I don't know when the night is going to end. I never expected 2021 to be so long. There were things going on last year that I kept thinking, oh, this is going to be it. This is the beginning of the change. This is the beginning of something new. And then it just seemed like all of that expectation just sort of evaporated and just sort of died out. It was never like there was somebody that shut the door on it. It just didn't happen. It just never went anywhere. But I'm telling you, there's a miracle coming. There's a change coming. God is not finished. He's not finished with you. He's not finished with your children. He's not finished with your relationships. He's not finished with your finances. He's not finished with your health. He's not finished with your children's health. He's not finished with your anything. Just because you can't see where it's all going and you can't see the end, what I'm telling you is God is at work.
Yes.
Think about the Israelites on the shore of the Red Sea. The sea in front of them, the Egyptians behind them, nowhere to go, no military training, no weapons, no way to fight the Egyptians. I'm sure that night, if you would have taken a survey and you would have asked any of the 3 million Israelites, what do you think's going to happen here? My guess is they were praying for some type of a plague to hit the Egyptians. They were hoping that somehow they would, in the morning, the Egyptians would all be dead and they'd be free then to figure out how they're going to get around the sea. The ones that weren't thinking that were probably trying to figure out, I'm hoping that in the morning when the Egyptians storm our camp that they'll allow me to have my old place back. I don't know what they were thinking, but I almost guarantee you this, that not one of them was thinking, you know what, in a few hours, this whole sea is just going to part right down the middle,
Right.
and we're going to walk through, and there's going to be water on the left and water on the right, and we're going to walk through on dry ground, and then in the morning at daybreak, the Egyptian army is going to find itself trapped in that Red Sea, and then the sea's going to come back over them, and we're all going to be delivered. I doubt if there was a single Israelite that would have said, that's what I think's going to happen. Well, guess what? That's what God has planned for you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jesus.
The Israelites just wanted to be delivered from, the Israelites just wanted to be delivered from the Egyptians. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
They just wanted to be delivered from the Egyptians. What they didn't understand was that God was interested in more than just their deliverance. He was interested in their advancement. He was taking them into the promised land.
Yes.
That whole event was sort of like it was not just the end of their slavery. It was the beginning of their destiny. It was the beginning of their purpose. It was the beginning of their identity.
Yes.
The rest of the Old Testament, and for most of the New Testament, everyone in Israel always looked back at that event as part of their identity. Their very identity, their purpose, was being formed in that night season. Joseph's identity was being formed in the night season. Your identity, your purpose, your destiny is being formed in your night season.
Yes.
In this time when you don't understand what's going on, you don't understand why we're not making any progress. God is on the move even when you don't see any movement.
Yes.
You ever wonder why God had to tell us to be still and know He is God?
Wow. Wow.
Because that's not our natural tendency to do it.
Right.
If we would do that naturally, He wouldn't have had to give us that direction.
Right.
It says in the word, be still.
Hmm.
Be still. When you don't know what else to do, just be still.
Amen.
Be still. And know He is God.
Amen.
I was hoping today that God would give me something that I could tell you, this is what's going to happen this month. This is what's going to happen in the year 2022. God didn't give me any of that.
No.
But what I do know is this. God is at work.
Amen.